The bear trap. In Saw, Amanda was a young woman destroyed by drug addiction and completely lost in life. Then John Kramer decides to turn her into one of his very first tests. Amanda wakes up strapped to a chair wearing the famous reverse bear trap, the device attached to her head that will rip her jaw apart if the timer runs out. The only way to survive is to find a key hidden inside the stomach of an unconscious man lying next to her. The problem? He's still alive. While a lot of people in these movies panic and waste time trying to understand the rules, Amanda quickly realizes what the real test is. It wasn't about solving some complicated puzzle, it was about deciding how far she was willing to go to stay alive. And that's what still makes the scene work so well today. Amanda makes a choice and manages to escape literally at the very last second. The pen. In Saw 5, Peter Strahm had already become obsessed with discovering who was continuing Jigsaw's games after John Kramer's death. Unlike many victims in the franchise, Strahm wasn't just some random person. He was an extremely intelligent FBI agent, and maybe one of the only people who ever came close to exposing Hoffman. The problem is that Hoffman realizes this pretty quickly. At the beginning of the movie, Strahm wakes up trapped in a completely insane device. His head is locked inside a glass box while water slowly starts filling it up. There's no easy key, no secret button, and definitely no time to think clearly. It's literally a race against drowning, and this is where one of the craziest decisions in the franchise happens. Instead of panicking, Strahm grabs a simple pen and performs an improvised tracheotomy on himself. Basically, he creates a way to breathe while the box completely fills with water. It feels desperate, but at the same time, insanely smart. The coffin. In the same movie, after surviving the water box trap, Strahm becomes convinced that Hoffman is the true successor to Jigsaw. And he was right. The problem is that Hoffman manages to turn that intelligence into a weakness. At the end of the movie, Hoffman leads Strahm into a strange room with a giant glass coffin in the center. Then a recording starts playing. The message is simple: get inside the coffin and survive. Stay outside and die. But it sounds exactly like an obvious trap. Strahm, who spent the entire movie trying to prove Hoffman is a manipulative killer, simply doesn't believe anything he's hearing. When Hoffman enters the room, the agent attacks him and forces him into the coffin. At that moment, it looks like the villain has finally lost. Then the walls start closing in, and that's when Strahm realizes too late that the recording was telling the truth. The coffin was literally the only safe place in the entire room. While Hoffman goes down protected inside it, Strahm gets trapped and crushed by the walls. Hoffman wins without using physical strength. He completely understands how Strahm thinks. He knew the agent would never trust such a simple instruction coming from a serial killer, so he builds the entire situation around the FBI agent's paranoia. That's what turns the scene into one of the cruelest traps in the franchise: escaping without the key. In Saw 6, Mark Hoffman finally becomes a target in his own game. Up to this point in the franchise, Hoffman had already taken over Jigsaw's legacy and used the traps far more as excuses to eliminate people than as life lessons. And that's what makes him different from John Kramer. While Jigsaw believed he was teaching people something, Hoffman only cared about surviving and removing any threat in his way. But this time, the one who decides to test Hoffman is Jill Tuck, John's ex-wife. She locks the detective inside the famous reverse bear trap. But now there's one important detail: there is no key. Jill basically leaves Hoffman there to die while the timer counts down. It seemed impossible to escape. Hoffman tries everything. He breaks his own hand to free himself from the chair, tries to force the mechanism open, and realizes he's running out of time. He looks at the door and has an idea. Instead of removing the trap, he stops it from fully opening. When the timer runs out, the machine activates normally, but the bars hold part of the mechanism back and prevent the impact from becoming fatal. Hoffman survives. The arm. In Saw 6, Simone was part of a fraud scheme with Eddie, faking accidents to get insurance money. But as always in Saw, Jigsaw turns that exact mistake into punishment. The two wake up chained to opposite sides of a giant scale. The rule is simple and horrifying: whoever loses the most weight survives. Whoever can't is done for, and the clock starts ticking. At first, Eddie thinks he found the perfect strategy. He starts cutting off small pieces of his own body, trying to slowly add more weight. Simone tries doing the same thing, but quickly realizes something important: she's never going to catch up before time runs out. And that's when one of the craziest decisions in the franchise happens. Simone stops hesitating, grabs a cleaver, and starts brutally cutting off her own arm. Within seconds, the scale drops to her side and the trap ends. While Eddie was trying to play it safe, Simone solved the problem in the most extreme way possible and escaped. The love triangle. In Saw 3D, one of the most disturbing traps involves three people. Brad and Ryan wake up chained to opposite sides of a table while electric saws sit between them. Above them is Dina, the woman both of them had been involved with at the same time. And the game basically forces the two men to decide who deserves to stay alive. At first, the situation turns into exactly the kind of chaos Jigsaw wanted. Brad and Ryan start pushing the saws toward each other, while Dina desperately tries to manipulate both of them. The interesting detail is that she completely changes her attitude depending on who seems to be winning. When Brad has the upper hand, end, she says she loves Brad. When Ryan takes control, she switches sides within seconds. But then the two men finally realize the obvious. They were never really enemies. They were both being manipulated by the same person the entire time. So instead of continuing to try killing each other, Brad and Ryan team up and turn the saws against Dina. The result? Both of them escape, but Dina doesn't. An insane decision. In Saw, we meet Dr. Lawrence Gordon, a doctor chained up alongside another man named Adam. Neither of them has any idea how they got there, but they quickly realize how serious the situation is. One of them has to die before time runs out, or Gordon's family will be murdered. And the worst part is that Jigsaw leaves 2 rusty saws in the bathroom just to mess with them, because the saws can't cut through the chains. They cut through bone. For most of the movie, Gordon tries to solve everything rationally. He analyzes clues, tries to understand Jigsaw's plan, and looks for any possible way out. It makes sense since he's a doctor, but as the clock keeps ticking and he realizes his wife and daughter are truly in danger, the character understands something terrifying. There is no clean way out. Then comes one of the most famous scenes in horror history. Gordon wraps a shirt around his leg to reduce the bleeding, grabs the saw, and makes the decision that basically defined the entire identity of the franchise. And the most intense part of the sequence isn't even the violence, it's the desperation of the character realizing that this truly is the only option. What's interesting is that Saw had an extremely low budget, so the production made up for it by focusing completely on psychological tension. And it worked even better. On top of that, Gordon became one of the most important characters in the franchise after surviving, something very few people expected from the first movie.
No! Game over. No!
The chain. In Saw 4, a trap forces Art Blank and Trevor to stay chained to each other, while a machine slowly pulls them both toward a very ugly fate. The detail is that Trevor's eyes are sewn shut, leaving him completely blind, while Art has his mouth sealed shut. One can't speak, the other can't see. Trevor panics almost immediately. Without understanding what's happening, he starts attacking everything around him, using any object he can find. The guy basically decides random violence is the solution. Meanwhile, Art does the opposite. Even without being able to speak, he tries to observe the environment and understand the rules of the trap. And that's when he notices an incredibly important detail. The key that can free both of them is hanging around Trevor's neck. The problem is that Trevor won't stay still for even a second. The guy is completely losing it. So Art makes a brutal decision. He manages to kill Trevor, take the key, and free himself. The trap was beaten because Art managed to stay calm for a few minutes. Trevor didn't die because he was trapped. He died because he panicked before thinking. The ankle. In Saw 3, Detective Eric Matthews wakes up trapped in the same filthy bathroom where Dr. Gordon was chained up, and the setup already tells the whole story. Chain around the ankle, rusty pipe, and a hacksaw lying on the floor. Something every fan of the franchise already knows the meaning of. But Matthews has one important advantage. He already knows what happened there before. The guy saw the result of Dr. Gordon's choice, and immediately understands what the expected solution is. But unlike Gordon, Matthews realizes there might be a less disturbing way to escape. While trying to free himself, he finds the heavy lid from a toilet tank and starts smashing his ankle against the ground until the bones are destroyed enough for him to slip out of the shackle. The scene is uncomfortable precisely because it feels like something someone would actually do in a hopeless situation. It's not an elegant solution, it's pure survival instinct, and somehow it works. Matthews manages to escape while keeping his foot attached to his leg, avoiding the insane blood loss that almost killed Gordon in the first movie. What's most interesting is how this scene shows the evolution of the characters throughout the franchise. Matthews literally learns by observing someone else's mistake, the blood. In Saw 5, Malik Scott and Britt Stevenson make it to the final trap alive after an entire group dies, trying to sabotage each other along the way. The final room looks simple, at least at first glance. There's a machine demanding 10 liters of blood to open the exit door. The problem? The system was clearly designed for 5 people to share the sacrifice. Only 2 are left. Malik almost instantly panics and jumps to the worst possible solution. Kill Britt and use all of her blood himself. But Britt stops, studies the structure of the trap, and realizes something important. Every previous test was designed around teamwork. The whole group died because nobody trusted each other. So she quickly does the math. If one person gives everything, they die. But if both of them split it equally, they might survive long enough for help to arrive. And that's exactly what they do. The two place their arms into the machine at the same time and begin sacrificing their own blood together while the counter slowly fills up. A lot of people consider Saw 5 one of the most underrated movies in the series, specifically because of this ending. For the first time, somebody actually understands the game before it's too late. The hair. In Saw 4, one of the traps revolves around Brenda, a woman involved in exploiting young people who ends up placed by Jigsaw into a completely horrifying trap. Brenda is strapped to a chair while her own hair is wrapped around metal gears. As the mechanism spins, her scalp slowly starts getting ripped away. And yeah, just the idea of this trap alone is painful. At the same time, we have Officer Daniel Rigg entering one of the most intense traps in the franchise right at the beginning of the movie. His objective was simple: ignore the situation and walk away. Jigsaw wanted to prove that the officer had an obsession with with saving everyone, even when he shouldn't. But obviously, Rig can't stand still. He desperately starts searching for the combination that can free Brenda before the machine finishes the job. The entire scene turns seconds into an eternity. Every gear turning feels worse than the last one. In the end, Rig manages to save Brenda in time, but that barely counts because immediately afterward, Saw does what the franchise loves doing most, flipping everything upside down. The moment she's freed, Brenda grabs a knife and tries to attack the very man who just saved her life. She believed Rig was there to arrest her again, and because of that, she ends up getting killed by him during the panic attack. So she survives the trap, only to die seconds later. The carousel. In Saw 6, the movie follows William Easton, an insurance executive responsible for denying treatment to countless people, including patients who genuinely needed help. One of them was John Kramer himself. The most intense trap in the movie happens during the famous shotgun carousel. William enters a room and finds 6 employees trapped on a rotating carousel, while an automatic shotgun points at each of them one by one. The rule is brutal, only 2 can survive. But Jigsaw didn't simply want to turn it into a random massacre. William had to choose who to save using the exact same logic he used at work. Every time he decides to stop a shotgun blast, he has to shove his hand into a mechanism filled with sharp spikes to activate the system, and he can only do it twice. The scene instantly becomes psychological chaos. Every employee tries convincing William they deserve to live more than the others. Some beg, others cry. The atmosphere becomes desperate incredibly fast. In the end, only Emily and Shelby survive. A lot of fans consider this one of the best traps in the entire franchise, precisely because it works more on a psychological level than through visual shock. The needles. In Saw 2, Xavier Chavez is a violent drug dealer placed inside the famous nerve gas house alongside several other victims. Everyone there needs to find antidotes hidden throughout the rooms before the poison kills them. But Xavier's challenge ends up being one of the grossest in the entire franchise. To get an important key, he has to search through a hole filled with used syringes. Yeah, literally a mountain of needles. But Xavier quickly makes it clear that he has no intention of sacrificing himself for anyone. Instead of going into the pit himself, he grabs Amanda Young and throws her in there by force to search for the key for him. The guy turns another victim into a survival tool without thinking twice. Even without getting the antidote at that moment, Xavier still walks away from the situation practically unharmed. And that makes the scene even more frustrating. While everyone else suffers trying to play by the rules, he survives through intimidation and brutality. Later, the character becomes even more paranoid after discovering that the numbers written on the backs of the victims' necks are part of a safe combination. And of course, he decides to cut his own piece of skin off to get the number, because in Saw, absolutely nobody does things normally. What's even more interesting is that Xavier became one of the most hated and at the same time most memorable characters in Saw 2 because of this completely unhinged attitude, the pigs. In Saw 3, Halden is the judge responsible for giving a lighter sentence to the drunk driver who killed Jeff Denlin's son. Ever since then, Jeff has been consumed by anger and the desire for revenge. And that's exactly what Jigsaw wants to test. When Jeff finds Halden, the judge is chained at the bottom of a massive vat while rotting pig carcasses begin getting ground up above him. The resulting liquid slowly fills the tank, threatening to drown the man in a disgusting mixture. And the worst part is that Halden can't do absolutely anything on his own. His survival depends entirely on Jeff. To free the judge, Jeff has to give up objects that belonged to his dead son, burning memories of his own child in order to get the key to the trap. Jeff clearly hates the man, but at the same time understands that Halden didn't directly kill his son. The judge was simply doing his job within the law, and that's exactly the conflict that makes the test interesting. In the end, Jeff manages to overcome part of his hatred and saves Halden seconds before the trap finishes. What's interesting is that, unlike many characters in the franchise, Halden genuinely seemed remorseful about the impact of the decisions he made. On screen right now is a video where we show the smartest decisions ever made in horror movies. Click and watch.